Welcome back to Talking Ball. It's Jack and JD. And after two, I guess, somewhat similar ACC semifinal games last night, where Duke had a 20-plus point lead in the second half, and it ended up coming down to one play, and Duke was able to hang on and win by 3 points. And Louisville was up 15 points with less than 4 minutes to go, and it came down to one play, and they were able to hang on and win by 3 points. And now both teams, quick turnaround. Thankfully, I think for both teams, the game isn't until 8:30 tonight, so that will give them a little bit more time to rest and recover. And both teams have some key injuries, which we'll talk about. But you've got a Louisville team that has now won 11 in a row. Duke, I think they're up to 9 in a row. You've got a team that's 30-3 going up against a team that's 27-6. And so I think for the ACC tournament final, putting the injuries aside, which we'll talk about, it's about all you could ask for to represent the conference. And it's going to be, I think, a great game between Duke and Louisville. And we've got a few things to discuss, JD. Where do you want to go first?
Well, let's see. I think that the fact that Louisville and Clemson wound up as advertised a close game, and therefore Louisville they didn't quite escape the way we did. There wasn't some guy at the free throw line who decided to just do something really weird. But nonetheless, they were in a really tough game last night. And as you said, there's injuries. And I think that for me, the greatest hope that I have as a Duke fan is, as one of the themes from last night's program was, it was a tale of two halves. And the Duke team that played in the first half is capable of beating Louisville. The problem is that with two halves to play, it may be a bridge too far. It may just be too hard. And unless someone decides to wither at the free throw line, then I'm not certain, but I will forever be optimistic and say that somehow we're going to pull this off.
So the first game against Louisville and is, I don't even know if it's really worth bringing up because they're basically two different teams with the injuries, and also quite frankly how much better Louisville has been since I think they lost to Kentucky 2 games after, but since then they've been on a tear. And Duke improved certainly since then. But in that game, with about 10 minutes and 30 seconds to go, Duke was down by 5. Cooper Flagg picked up his 4th foul. And then Duke went on a run and ended up winning the game by 11 points. Now, in this one, like I said, let's talk about the injuries. I've alluded to it. I think it's important. It affects the game here. So for Louisville, they will be without their best three-point shooter by far, and that's Rain Smith. And he's not played in the last 3 games for Louisville, which have all been wins. Obviously, they've won, 11 in a row? I don't know. I'm still kind of half asleep here. But he's not played. He shoots 9 threes a game, and he's connected on over 40% in conference play. The one thing going back to that first matchup, they were I remember saying something like they were in the top 20 teams in 3-point attempts, but they were in the bottom 50 in 3-point percentage. That's changed. In conference play, they've really started connecting on a lot more of their threes. And in particular, I know they don't have Rain Smith, which is a big deal, but they've got 3 guys who are going to play basically the entire game tonight. and that's Terrence Edwards, Chucky Hepburn, and Javon Hadley. Quick aside for me and Javon Hadley, who went to my alma mater, Northeastern. He couldn't play for Northeastern, ended up going to a JUCO, and then now has been on 2 NCAA tournament teams, last year with Colorado and this year with Louisville. Just funny how the college basketball world works sometimes. I'm sure he improved and etc. But those 3 guys, Edwards is shooting 35% from 3 on about 6 attempts conference play. Hepburn 36% on 5 attempts. And then Hadley's at 46% on just under 3 attempts per game. So they're shooting much better as a team. Their starting lineup has changed without Rain Smith. James Scott has been their starting center really since Kaysen Pryor went down, and he's not a shooter, but he knows his role. He makes 70% of his field goals. He's a guy you dump it down to and can dunk. He's much more mobile than the Duke big guys, but he's also not nearly as big at like 6'11", 215. And then Waterman has been starting. He's also 6'11", but he's a three-point shooter, and he struggled for a good portion of the year. But in these last 3 games, since he's getting more playing time without Rain Smith, he's 8 for his last 15 from 3. And I think the three-point shooting and the spacing for Louisville are going to be the things that Duke is going to have to contest with. And there's a specific lineup that I want to talk about in a few minutes here for Louisville that I think could cause Duke some issues.
So, look, Chucky Hepburn is their guy, and this is going to require, and Coach Shire made it clear we're playing man-to-man. Didn't even once go into a zone last night, which I think might have helped break up the momentum, but that's the way he wanted to play it. First half was phenomenal. Just phenomenal. I mean, you kind of like go, oh, wait, Cooper Flagg and Malik Brown aren't even playing. And they were. So we need Tyrese Proctor to have one of his games where he shuts down Chucky Hepburn and really makes it difficult in the way that last night RJ couldn't get them rolling, although a lot of other people contributed. It's clearly going to be Tyrese Proctor's job. So I originally thought it was going to be a night where Tyrese needs to go for 20. I think he needs to take away the head of the snake and their, all ACC player and Chucky Hepburn. And so that's my first observation is I think that is what we're going to need to do.
So Coach Shire, I'm sure he kind of even admitted he was still it was a blur, I think was the word he used, how the game finished. So I think he'll probably reevaluate the game, today or maybe even last night, and maybe have a different takeaway. But the one thing he said in terms of a potential adjustment in the second half was he said the first 2 games they switched on defense. In this game, they did not against North Carolina. And he said that was maybe something they should have done in the second half to just throw a different look at North Carolina. And then on Proctor, the one thing I want to mention, because I know we did talk about his missed free throw at the end of the game against North Carolina. He did hit a big turnaround mid-range shot under the 4-minute mark, which brought Duke's lead back up to 6. With the way that game finished, that was a really important shot.
It was, and I remember the shot well because it hit the front of the rim, and I didn't know if it wasn't a clean shot. So I wasn't certain whether it was going in, but I said, well, I'll take it. Good shot.
And one other takeaway from listening to the press conference last night, Khan made a point which I thought was actually pretty spot on. And he said, basically to paraphrase, um, it was good to be in another close game. They haven't had a lot of those opportunities throughout the season, and I think that's a good point. In how we kept talking about how it would typically be Cooper Flag in those situations. Even with Cooper Flag, they haven't. How many times have they been in that game? 5, maybe 6 throughout the entire season. So they haven't just had a lot of those opportunities as a team. So I think it was good that they were in that situation, and even better that they were able to be in that situation and escape with a win. Um, so I talked about before the lineup that could give Duke some issues. The one lineup I'm concerned about for Duke is when Louisville, with Scott on the floor, Gangba and Maluach can stay in the paint with Scott. But Louisville, Scott's going to play 24, 25 minutes is what he typically plays. And there will be times where Waterman is at center, which means all 5 guys are capable of shooting the 3. And that's going to space out the Duke defense and mean that whoever's on the court, Maluach or Gangba, is going to be out on the perimeter. And it's really unfortunate because this is another game that just has Malik Brown written all over it. With his ability to switch, his ability to defend on the perimeter. And it's one of those games where if he was healthy, the minute distribution where it's sometimes 20-20, you could see this one being a 25-15 for Malik. And it's one of those things where you wish you had him for this game, but they don't. And so, as you said last night, this is the team we have. And the one thing I'm curious, and we also don't have Cooper Flag, who would be great in a game like this, especially because you could play, Mason Gillis at center, and then have Flag around to defend the paint, as he's done so well. And so the thing that I'm curious about for Duke is how they will combat that lineup for Louisville. Will they try to play small? Will they try to use Maluach and Gangba's size to their advantage offensively? And I think if that's the case, it's got to be Gangba because he's much better. Maluach, we did see him hit a couple of nice, like kind of hook shots.
Jump push shots.
Yeah.
They weren't quite a hook.
Right. But Gangba has the ability to put the ball on the floor and drive it to the basket, which Maluach does not have yet. And so I think the bigs, while they could be stretched defensively, I think it's going to be important that they make their presence felt on the opposite end of the court, whether that's scoring or getting offensive rebounds.
So, to use a really bad pun, if it rains threes, we're going to have a problem. If it's one of those nights where they, put up 30 threes and hit 16 or so, 17, then I don't know that we have the offensive ability to come back. Cooper Flag did have 4 fouls, but I'm pretty certain he was 20-10. It was a 20-point game and 10 rebounds for him against Louisville. And so you take that out of the equation, and that is a major loss. But I'm going to again urge Coach Shire to mix things up solely to different looks. So you said on defense, instead of always staying with your man, switching more, every so often just drop into a zone. And we talked about it, the 2-3 extending further out for the, to guard against 3-point shooting. And then have one of the big guys in the middle if they do get the ball inside. So that's kind of, it's going to be a tough game. It's just going to be a tough game.
I agree, and I think in some ways this game could make even more sense for mixing in the zone, um, just because you probably don't want Malawach and Gangba for different reasons out on the perimeter, guarding, let's say it's Waterman, and against North Carolina, while Van Allen Lubin had a tremendous game, because he's not a 3-point shooter, it allowed Malawach and Gangba to stay around the basket. And in that lineup with Waterman at center, they're not going to be able to do it, so it might make sense to mix in the zone. The one thing I think Duke did a really good job on against North Carolina, and as you mentioned, RJ Davis, was guarding the 3-point line. And the only guy who was really hitting threes for North Carolina was Elliot Cadeau. And based off how they guarded him, I think that was the like scouting report or the design of the defense to let Cadeau shoot threes. He hit them, but he's not a good 3-point shooter. That it made sense. The game plan, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. Made sense. And so in this one, I think it's almost like you try to make them beat you inside. And you just limit, you try to make them shoot tough threes if they're going to shoot them, and you try to make them score either from mid-range or getting to the rim. And if you're in the zone, and Malawach especially is at the rim, or just, Gangba, the way he played yesterday, it could be a tough game for Louisville if Duke is able to force them off the 3-point line. So I agree with you. I think at the simplest terms, this game comes down to the 3-point line and how Duke guards the 3-point line. And then on the opposite end of the court, can Kahn continue to shoot the 3 well? Can Proctor get going? He hasn't shot the 3 well these last 2 games. Can we get Evans more looks? I thought, kind of just going back to the last game, he had, like late in the shot clock, he pump faked and then sidestepped 3, and I thought that was going in. It was a good look from Evans. And I think there's a chance. He had a good game against Georgia Tech. I think there's a good chance he has a bounce-back game. But I think it's important to note Louisville's defense has gotten much better since the last time Duke played Louisville. They are now a top 25 defense on Ken Palm. And it's because even though they're a bit undersized at positions, especially when they go to Waterman at center, their guards, led by Hepburn, but also Terrence Edwards has been a much better defender since they've turned the corner. And they do a good job of applying pressure and just making things uncomfortable for the opposing team. And that's going to be something where I think this could turn into a real defensive game.
Well, and when in the second half of last night's game, when UNC was able to apply pressure and the freelance style of offense without any set plays, it was very, very disruptive to Duke having any kind of flow. And Louisville will do that from the all 40 minutes. And the question is, how do we respond? This is going to be so. The ACC Coach of the Year was Louisville's coach, and
Wait,
this is a
one more. The ACC Defensive Player of the Year was Chucky Hepburn.
Well, we can't do much about that because Coop's not playing, but we can.
I can still be upset about it, though.
You can be, and I was, but okay, but he's still
a great defender.
Yes, he is. But this is a chance for Coach Shire to outcoach the guy that beat him out. And he doesn't have Jay Lucas to, help design the defense, which the first half, God, just a ridiculous game last night. The first half, he didn't need Jay Lucas. They were phenomenal.
No Jay Lucas, and didn't have their 2 best defenders on top of it.
And yet they held them to, and a point we really didn't make was 23.
I think it was 24.
24 points. 24 points. That was just a phenomenal and it had a 20-point lead. I mean, just a phenomenal effort. How does Coach Shire get that defensive energy against Louisville, and who steps up that we're not, thinking about it? Is it one of those nights where, you know, who knows what's in the water? Khan goes for 30, and you go, my goodness. So, do I think? Wow, I can't. Do you have any way to see? Is there a point spread on this game yet?
Oh yeah, it's actually the same spread as of right now. It'll probably change as the North Carolina game was last night, which surprised me. Duke 6.5 point favorite.
Over Louisville.
I'm I've kind of gobsmacked, to be honest.
Uh, uh, they are aware that Cooper Flag isn't playing. They are aware that Malik Brown isn't playing. They are aware that Louisville's been on this incredible win streak and is now a top 25 team and has been for a while. That Louisville just beat Clemson in a really good game. And Clemson, it was number 13 or 10,
10. I
somewhere.
think Louisville's 13.
Okay, they both rose really high there. Um, so that I was expecting you to say it's Louisville by 3.5, and I'm shocked that it's that we are the favorite. Um,
Um. All right. Well, look, I think before we get into our score predictions here, gotta give a shout, as you said, Coach of the Year, Pat Kelsey. They've won. They may have won like twice as many games this year with Louisville as they did the previous 2 years combined. So talk about a major turnaround, and it's good for the conference. I think the ACC is going to be much better with a lot of these young coaches coming in across the board for next season. But for this game, and please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share it with a friend. The score prediction for this game, JD, I think it's going to be a tough defensive game. I think the 3-point variance is going to matter for both teams. Whoever's hitting, I think, has got a major edge. Um, I'll I hate to say this, but my heart, I'm obviously rooting for Duke, but in my head, I've got Louisville winning this game 72-68. I think I just think Duke's injuries are much more significant. I'm with you. I'm surprised by the spread of this game. And while Rain Smith is important for Louisville, um, he's not Cooper Flag. And then obviously, Malik Brown. And I think his impact would be really important in this game. But I just think this is going to be a tough one for Duke to win based off the style that Louisville plays.
so, given the injuries to Coop and Malik, and having watched last night's game, and there were two different efforts in the first half and the second half. So I'm going to believe that Coach Shire having will be up all night trying to figure out how to make adjustments for this. I think Duke is going to win 80-75, and that it will be a close game, but it will settle at 80, a 5-point win by Duke. And we're going to be sitting there going, um, they did it, and being really happy and being really, that they could sit their two guys. Do I think there's a possibility that if it's raining threes, that we could suffer a pretty bad loss? Yeah, that's. just like last night, it was like, hey, the first half we're up by 20. Hey, the second half, we withered our way to a win, and so there's two different team efforts that could come out tonight. I'm going to say Duke is ready. Um, there is this intensity that they want to show these guys that are on the court that they can win without Cooper Flag. And yes, Louisville would like to have revenge for having lost at home, but it is a neutral court.
Yep.
Although everyone will be rooting against Duke, it's just the way it is.
All the
But
other teams fans that have stuck around that had tickets, for sure.
it'll be scalped, and Louisville and Duke people will be there. I I am optimistic that we're going to pull this out.
I certainly hope I'm wrong. I couldn't be happier if I'm wrong later tonight. And the only other point I want to put out before we wrap up, I think the pace of this game is going to be important, along with Duke's offense not hurting their defense. And the reason I say that is because I think if Duke can set up their half-court defense, I think they're going to be just fine defensively. But if their offense hurts their defense and it lets Louisville get out and run and we're scrambling defensively, that's going to allow them to get threes and open layups and dunks, similar to what we saw in the second half against North Carolina. And so I think the pace and more importantly, the offensive execution is going to be really important for Duke in terms of how this game is played.
We shall see.
We shall see.
Have less than 12. Wow. I thought with an 8:30 start, we'd have, ways to go, but it's already a quarter to 12 here on the East Coast for our West Coast listeners. And it's not long to game time. So get your Duke gear ready. Remember to believe in the Dukies. And I think we're going to have a surprise night here. And I think, after they both went down in the Georgia Tech game, and everyone said, not everyone, a lot of people said, that's it for Duke, that I think we get to March Madness having won the ACC tournament championship.
I mean, if that happens? I think it would be. It may. I think each game that they've, the Georgia Tech win. I think even though we saw a tale of two halves, if you just looked at the final score and Duke and didn't watch the game, you would say, "Wow, what a win by Duke without Flag and Brown against North Carolina." And if they pull this off, I think it will be even better. And so, to your point, if Duke is able to pull this off without Cooper Flag and Malik Brown, just an amazing team performance in the ACC tournament. But we will see, and we will have it covered immediately after the game tonight. So it should be somewhere between 10:30, 10:45 Eastern time tonight. And looking forward to a good game. We'll see you guys later. Peace.